Good morning, good evening, good night, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the second episode of SPCs Unleashed and the first episode where we actually really dive into a dimension. As we mentioned on our intro show, we're going to be rotating host moderators. And tonight we've got Stefan to kick us off and take us away. Over to you, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Mark. Welcome and grüezi, as we say in Switzerland, to this second episode. I will take you with me to set the stage. What is the core concept of this dimension? Let's start with the core competency, organizational agility. If we look at this description, it's interesting that we talk mainly about lean thinking people and agile teams. Lean thinking people who are able to optimize their business processes and then focusing into the agile teams who really do the work, who make strategy happen and even evolve strategy over the time, right? And as we know, as lean agile people, we should be able to quickly adapt to if it's necessary and if we have new opportunities or if we can see new opportunities. So now diving into the dimension, lean thinking people and agile teams, everyone is involved in solution generation, solution delivery. They should be trained. They should know what they do and how they do it. And that's not only something for technical teams, it's also the extension into the whole enterprise. This is enterprise sport, right? It's global optimization. And therefore, I'm really excited about this core competency and this dimension to start with in episode 2. We'll see there's new patterns that arise. If business kicks in, if it's enterprise sport, we should broaden our horizon. And we shouldn't forget people doing the work, they need a good toolbox. They need agile work environments, they need good tools. And therefore, as we are talking about SPCs unleashed, what are the measure and grow areas that we should look at? One of them is agile teams, no matter if they're technical and business teams. So, quick reminder, teams should be cross-functional, long-lived, and relentlessly improving, as I mentioned in the introduction. And this extension to the business will be very interesting for us as change agents, applying this 3-step maturity cycle, bringing in those who help us deliver the solutions over the time. Second area, measure and grow. How about operational value stream and business leaders, right? So lean thinking people includes management, includes executives, includes business owners, those who are responsible for the operation of value streams. And they're on a learning journey as well. How do we help them? We train them, we coach them, and we make sure they're really on the train. And one big learning for me as I prepared this session and I had some discussions with my mates is, hey, Agile HR is on the train as well. Because if we are talking about the people, it's about mindset, values, and principles. If these guys don't know what they do and what is it based on, we're probably lost. So onboarding Agile HR at an early stage is something very beneficial. And the third area to consider is how do you design work environments for those lean thinking people and the agile teams? So we're really talking about physical spaces. We will be talking about agile processes and those processes being supported by agile tooling. So that will be the stage. And let me kick it off. And I would like my mates to join the conversation. When and in which context might expertise in this dimension be important to you guys? Who will take the talking stick?
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Ali,
Ali.
you just volunteered.
Oh, God. Okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good night for some. We We've been preparing this this talk a little bit, and I thought that all of us had sort of a slightly different angle to look at the same core competency, which is really interesting to see. The angle that I was sort of attracted to was the fact that whenever we talk about agile teams, agile release trains, but also tribes and leagues and team of teams, we tend to focus on whomever is designing and producing the product or the solution. And that is, if I would make a little sidestep to let's say a non-software development environment, for instance, whenever a machine is being created, whenever a company is creating a machine, we just see that it gets sort of the scope is limited. The agile release train is limited to those that are designing the machine. However, down the how should I call it? It's not down the drain. that would be something else. But sort of along the value stream, there are people that are involved in industrialization. There are people that are involved in logistics. There are people that are involved in the servicing after the product or the machine is on the market. And typically, they are forgotten. So if an SPC is operating in an environment in which actually many different, I'll just call it engineering disciplines, are required in order to get that machine out there into the market, then diving into this core competency is important. It's essentially trying to understand the periphery of the train in this case, and involving whomever is needed to get that thing out there.
Thank you, Ali. What tickles your brain, Nico, when it comes to contextualizing this dimension?
And push to talk newbie. You're still a push to talk newbie.
Oh, great. Perfect. It's when you change your settings. So what I really like is you need everybody on this train, on this environment, or however you call it. And I will go also in the other direction. You need also management. You need people on a portfolio, on a strategy level, who also are in teams, who also are lean and agile. So it's not only going down, it's wrong because it's on the picture down. It doesn't mean they are less value. Going down to teams, it's also going up to the portfolio to a management layer. So everybody who is involved, business, management, classic management, HR, marketing, legal, everybody in this enterprise should be able to be agile and to be lean. And that's why as an SPC, now you have a lot of things to do, maybe uncomfortable, depending where you come from. I realized in our preparation that many SPCs don't have my background coming from IT, coming from software development. So if you don't come from this area, you have to grow in this area. If you don't come from business or strategy, you have to grow in this area. It's, by the way, what I've tried to do the last 3 years, reading more books about strategy, discussing with business people, wearing shirts. No. So really involve everybody who is needed to be agile as a company.
Thank you, Nico. What are your thoughts, Mark, when it comes to corporate development, organizational development, this lean thinking?
Look, I think for me, what was fascinating as we bounce backwards and forwards on our thoughts prepping for this, as Ali pointed out, was we just came at it from such different angles. And, the one thing that we all struggled with was narrowing ourselves to just one dimension of the 21. Because there's so many things that go together in our heads that to really laser in and go, well, what's this one dimension all about? And recognize the stuff that really should be talked about somewhere else. That was a challenge. But then I think the other challenge is if you look at the different angles we came at it from, although we've had this huge issue of how do we narrow down to one dimension. The more that you narrow it down and think about it and look at the different perspectives, the more you realize how massive the dimension is, right? And,
Agreed.
it was kind of a lot of you really focused to the management and the operational value stream perspective. I focused towards, well, what happens when you start to branch out? If you didn't start with, and we'll use the new terminology from Safe 6, if you didn't start with business enabled arts or business arts, and you started with technology arts, this competency is the moment in time when you get to expand from being a technology art to being a business enabled art, right? If you leave, if just one aspect of the dimension, everything that comes with that. And all of a sudden, you've got these folks who, to get to true value, to get to a real solution, they might not have been there in the technology art, but they've been critical to getting outcomes. And hopefully you've begun by at least engaging them from a collaboration perspective. Your business owners, if you haven't got business people in your business owner group, you're in trouble. But what have you done to set your business owners up for success? And then what I love about the way that they position the kind of 1, 2, 3 process is that notion that says, I'm not forcing people to come straight away. I'm building awareness. I'm starting to help them internalize how Agile can apply to their work. And then gradually moving to the point where they're not just working Agile themselves, but they're working Agile as part of the art. And it's, for me, that if I'm a change agent looking into the competency, I'm saying, what new tools do I need in my toolkit to be able to do that? You go and talk to a business team about how you do Agile, and they go, well, how does this work for us? What's the story in our world? What's a sprint? We've got a mix of BAU work and planned work. We've got a day job. And there's so many concepts that all of a sudden are different. And you've got to be able to learn to speak their language and bring them on the journey and start to internalize for themselves how this different way of working can actually be relevant to them. So that was kind of the step one, right? And that's a huge step in itself. But then you go, well, actually, it's also Agile HR, right? And the truth is, you might hit Agile HR long before you hit expanding to business enabled arts. Because you're not far in, particularly in your first art, you're not far in before you're going, what's the official job description in the organization role hierarchy for a product owner or a scrum master? What does career progression look like? How does it change our hiring practices? How does it change our performance management practices? And, what have you got to learn to start to lean in and be able to work there? Because I know for a long time, my early Agile days, I was like, role titles, they're a thing of the past. There's no role titles in Agile. We're all just team members. That's a very naive view, as I learned in later life.
So, how that changed.
If you're starting to lean in and hit that frontier, again, this is the dimension that's speaking to what you're doing there. And then I guess the last one that sat out to me was Agile work environments. And boy, that's an important one at the moment. And I found, and I'll talk about when we talk about books and things later, once upon a time, Agile work environments was, configure Jira so that it's your servant and not your master, and create great collaboration spaces in the office for your teams.
Have a whiteboard.
It's just a little bit more complicated now in these post-COVID days.
It's really interesting. Summarizing what we just discussed, and Ali, I'm picking up the keyword whiteboard, right? Going back to a meta level, it's as described in the article. It's the cornerstone of a new management approach, right? So management is not only senior management, it's also how do you self-organize as a team. So not jumping directly into the structural elements of SAFe, but keeping in mind, as it says in the article, optimizing business processes. It's not the development process. First of all, it's business. It's generating value. It's delivering value. Then evolving the strategy, being able to adapt quickly to the situations, right? And then going back into all those details. I really like that, preparing it. So let's move on. We're
Oh, I
talking
think
about this. Oh, Mark, sorry.
No, I saw Nico's hand, and just by the way, Nico,
Oh,
now that
yeah.
now that you've learned push to talk, you don't have to raise your hand. You can push to talk, and your little green border lights up.
Go for it.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I just wanted to tell a little story that maybe fits in what you are saying, Stefan. Um, when I was working with arts, I thought, oh, what hinders them to be in a flow? Or wouldn't it be nice to have a portfolio that they know on what to work? And then I'm starting being a professional portfolio and developing portfolios and helping people develop portfolios. And then I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have a priority in the portfolio? So, okay, I have to do more strategic themes. Great, let's do more strategic themes. And at the end, I ended up with, for strategic themes, I need a strategy. For a strategy, I need a management team that really understands the whole lean agile thinking, understands MVPs. And at the end, I ended up again coaching teams, but not development teams, developing agile executive teams. So at the end, it's really about not about the mechanics. It's really about being a team and being agile and being lean.
Exactly. Thank you, Nico. It really resonates with me. We're talking about the social system. Who are we supporting as an SPC? Who are we collaborating with? If we look at this first overview, what springs to your mind? It's for sure agile teams. And as we mentioned in the introductory part, it's operational value streams and business leaders. But what else adds to the social team? Who would like to kick it off?
Nico, you're in flow. Why don't you take us away?
With push to talk.
Okay, I removed the push to talk. I realize I'm too stupid for push to talk, so I going back to my old mode.
Nico,
Nice.
it's fine. We're talking about SPCs and Ts unleashed. Let's go.
Exactly.
Perfect.
That's right. For me, it's Sunday morning, so I'm still sleeping. Say it again, Stefan. Let me see where we are on the board. Sorry for that. So I follow you on the mirror board again. Say your question again. Sorry. With the laughing, I forgot what I wanted to talk to.
So
Say it
let's
again,
talk
please.
about the social system. We're collaborating and supporting as change agents a variety of people or groups. So we talked already about the agile teams. We talked about the business leadership, those who are responsible for P&L, for the organization, for the development. Who else is in it? Who else is on the train?
Exactly. Who else is on the train? I told in the beginning something like marketing could be, legal could be. What I realized the last year is I need HR too, somehow on the train. Here also a story of a colleague of mine. He once forgot HR, and they rolled everything back because at the end of the year, when the MBOs came, and the whole transformation team changed the kind of way of you are compensated, they just rolled everything back because they were not informed. They had before personal goals. Somehow the whole train switched to team goals, but HR wasn't aware of, and one guy wasn't happy with that, and then we rolled everything back. So HR is one important thing. 2 days before yesterday, I had to talk with somebody for the HR, saying how powerless they are sometimes. It's also work to do there. So how can you empower the the HR people? Sorry, helping us becoming HR, helping the company becoming agile. Sorry, agile and HR is so close. So how HR can help the company become agile? That's also one task that wasn't so easy that I thought in the beginning. I thought, yeah, we just talk with them and then it happens, but they have also a lot of obstacles they have to get rid of or help the company get rid of. So Agile HR is one group of people, and I still stick with executives because in my transformation it was 50-50. Some CEOs and C-level people wanted the transformation and were involved with time and with action, and other were just ordering. So like I order a half a kilo of meat. They just order 2 pounds of safe, and the other one just being part of this transformation and try to explain to people why it's important being part, not ordering it. It's also one dimension. So in my case, the last years was always executives was HR, which I involved, not struggled with. I talked to, I involved, I invited to be part of the journey.
Any similar experiences or different ones?
Go, Ali.
Yeah, I think I have one. Okay. Trying to compress a story of 2.5 years or something like that in 2 minutes, or maybe less. Large transformation, huge transformation. Many agile teams at a large aviation company where just the agile way of working just became the standard. It became the standard everywhere. It became the standard language, the way of working. People that were hired, so the new people that came in were sort of already agile adept. So they were completely agile minded. So that was it. It was a company-wide transformation, and along the way you feel that you're missing some people at the table. You feel that you're missing some people to be represented. Let me just call it differently: some departments to be represented at the LACE or at in your transformation team. And in this case, we've tried to involve the unions very early on to collaborate and participate and communicate and think along and also criticize all kinds of topics. Some of the topics that were actually just mentioned were job titles and job descriptions, because yes, all of a sudden we have about 100 Scrum Masters in the company. We have about I don't know, all of a sudden 150 product owners. We have all kind of agile coaches that are doing something. Some of them are internal, some of them are external. So there's responsibilities that are shifting, which also means that there is we have multidisciplinary teams that are comprised of internals and externals. There are different countries, there are different laws in different countries that state that I think that externals cannot dictate the work for internals. However, if you would have a product owner who is external and is managing a backlog, in a way, you would be able to interpret that as we have a product owner who selects the work for a team of internal team members and testers and analysts and architects and UX designers and whatever. Hence, you're in breach of law. You're in breach of law. So we've tried to involve the unions very early on, but the transformation team was not mature enough. The discussions were not mature enough. You know, you're trying to kick off all kind of trains and help out teams and get your business owners involved. So that means we got a disconnected union for a very long time, only to have them sort of with, you know, blazing hell and fire, with all alarm bells ringing, screaming that after a couple of years they are not involved, and you know they're halting the transformation. Why? Because we have all of these new roles and people are being hired with new job titles, which is not according to plan. So it was a huge mistake that we've made, not willingly, but by not involving them. And this is just a simple example. It's a very similar parallel to the Agile HR topic. By not involving them continuously, you get a huge disconnect afterwards, and that disconnect, it just materializes as a huge sort of a halt of a transformation. We are going to stop this right now, escalate everything to everywhere. It can become a mess. So I would say a union would be a good person to involve.
I like this perspective, Ali, and you're probably the source for many keywords today. Who could stop a train? Who could stop even a transformation? Any further thoughts about the social system, the people we should involve, no matter where we are on the transformation journey?
I think, and there was a thing that kept recurring to me as we looked at this dimension-based view, was what's your current context, right? Where are you today in your journey? because there's a piece of the puzzle that says, if you're trying to get your first art out of the blocks and you're trying to solve HR role titles, union relationships, facilities management standards, and the list keeps going, but I'll just use the three we've talked about. Right? It could be an awfully long time before you launch your first art to get everything grounded there. And the truth is, for a lot of people, they launch their first art and they go, we're going to get top cover. We're going to break some rules and we're going to, apologize later. And we've got somebody senior enough supporting us as we break some rules because we've got to get moving. And I think for me, there's a piece of that, which is you might break some rules early in terms of coming to conclusions. But the earlier you can bring these people to be part of your journey, and this for me comes out eventually when we talk about the lace in another competency, how early can you get representatives from these areas into your lace so that they're part of the experimentation, right? Because the earlier you can bring them into the experimentation, the more that they are going to see themselves as joint problem solvers as opposed to problem raisers. And, I listened to Ali's story and I went, wow, that's flashbacks to so many union stories in my past. But, he told some good ones, I won't add them. But I think the other the other aspect, and this was when I was looking at who you're supporting and collaborating with, there were probably two pieces to me. There was a piece which is, if you're working in this dimension, there's two dimensions that you just literally can't decouple from this. And again, it comes back to that, where are you in your journey? You can't decouple agile teams and you can't decouple lean agile leadership. Because if you haven't got agile teams, you haven't got anything. And if you haven't got lean agile leadership, you're not going to get very far. And so I really narrowed my focus when I was looking at this to go, actually, I'm going to leave the big deep dive on great agile teams to agile teams. And I'm going to leave the big deep dive on lean agile leadership to lean agile leadership. And I started to look at it through this lens to go, I'm going to assume that we're at a stage in the journey where we're changing our reach in the organization. We've already got some foundations in agile teams and lean agile leadership. But as we start to stretch to new places and new types of people, there's a flavor that it gives us to the foundations we've established in the other competencies. And it could be as simple as, if you're teaching a leading safe to a non-technical audience, right, and I've taught a lot of those, I've taught a lot of leading safes without a technical person in the room. How do you shift the conversation in the leading safe so that they're not just sitting there going, this is all technical mumbo jumbo, right? and there's an interesting set of combos here. But the other one I thought, and it was a really nice provocation from Rebecca as we went through the week, was she glanced at the Miro and she went, it looks like you're just talking to consultants. And, a lot of SPCs are sitting in a day job. And if you think about the way that we triggered all of this in terms of, how do we help LACEs grow in the competency of their internal SPCs to reduce their reliance on consultants, that lens of thinking about this going, you know what? I could be an RTE who's struggling with interference from line management, right? Because we're sitting in the dual operating system and I've got line managers giving different directives to their people embedded in the teams than what the team's working on. Or I had a case recently with an RTE where they had a performance management issue. It was somebody that rotated through 3 teams, assuming it was a team fit issue, and it really just was where that person was at. And how did we navigate? And it was very much the question for him of engaging HR, establishing some protocols, getting HR to help him navigate conversations with the line managers to start to get some real clarity around, how they would establish a pattern to solve a problem like that. So there's probably another angle in terms of who you're supporting and collaborating with. But in this case, I think the question was the RTE, and it was RTE as SPC going, I've got a new problem to solve. Actually, this is the dimension that's giving me some clues about where I go to grow and solve it. Because if I dug into Agile HR, that would maybe prime me for a conversation with my HR people.
What happens, what I realize, Mark, when I listen to you, what happens before you were some kind of a protected environment. When we are coaching just trains, it's some kind of protected. When you're going to this core competency, you also have to understand how power flows in the organization. You mentioned the dual operating system. So where is the guy or the lady protecting my leads? Who can cross my work because this person is coming from the hierarchy? So there's also a lot of sensing how the organization really works. Before this core competency is just, I'm doing my art stuff, I'm doing my team stuff, but now I also have to deal with many political issues which I wasn't aware of before, and that's also an area I have to grow. Sense this and name this, and try to find a solution how to bring these people on board. Because nobody is evil. They are doing are in our ways. They have other plans. They also want to do something good but different. So sensing this and naming this is also one of the jobs we have to do and we have to grow in.
So let me pick up your statements, gents, and let me use the analogy of soccer. What's the playground, right? You can play soccer in the backyard wearing t-shirts of the Champions League. It's still backyard soccer. You can play in the National League. You can play even in a Champions League. And let's quickly try to convey some of your experience when it comes to this becoming huge playground of what are sources that really might help us grow personally, or as you mentioned, Nico and Mark and Ali, how do we convey that what we've learned and the information into the context we are? Who would like to kick that off without going too much into details? Because I would like to spare a lot of time talking about our experiences, the books that helped us, the other context that we know that could be really helpful for SPCs in this dimension, lean thinking people and agile teams.
I skip this time. I talk too much.
I was going to say, I'll jump in first because I've got only a little bit here, right? What you've got on the Miro, Stefan, right? You've sat, you've trawled, you've compiled a great big set of links. And anybody watching, we're going to be placing the Miro for this show in a public place, and we'll share the link for it when we put it on YouTube. So rather than giving you 59,000 links at the bottom of a YouTube video, we can just give you the Miro. You can find the links for yourself. But I guess my comment generically on the links, because I want to talk about books and things, right? My comment generically on the links is there's an awful lot of people who don't take advantage of what SAFe has to give them, particularly these days with SAFe Studio. There's so much content. The videos they're producing, the little short, how to do this, the extended guidance and white papers, the framework articles you might go back and reread, that give you a hint when you're trying to solve a problem. Because I think there's an awful lot of people, SPCs included, they read the articles in the framework to pass their exam and they never reread them again. So how often is there before you have to go to extra sources where you could just go back and go, there's stuff I've bought and paid for with my certification that I could be using. So that's kind of my simple comment on the what's there in SAFe to help you grow.
More than
I
you
would
know.
take that. Yeah, sure. Ali?
So I think staying in the backyard football analogy or metaphor, you could wear the jersey of Lionel Messi and you can feel like Lionel Messi. You've passed your SPC exam and then you are Lionel Messi, but you're still in the backyard. I think the context depicts on or defines what type of material might be interesting for you. And I think sometimes diving into the theory, so let me just call it, the different articles, is the right way to go. Sometimes diving into practice and trying to, I don't know, go to a conference where similar type of companies that are going through these motions, going through transformation, are sharing their stories, might be a good source for, let's say, learning. I think sometimes we're, or at least my feeling is that there's this risk that we're very focused on. We need, if we're working safe, we need to find our answer from skilledagilephramawork.com. And it should be somewhere in there. And otherwise, it's not an answer. I think that's a great source of information. There's so much out there, indeed, in toolkits and articles, in videos, in customer stories. It's so rich. But sometimes it's also good to look at a similar company that is not the company that you work for, but that is talking about their experiences in adopting Agile at scale.
Perfect. Mark, you kicked it off. Let's talk about books. Why should we read books? What's your experience with books? I like books, right? Because they help me to start thinking. And as you already mentioned, what's a job to be done, and how do we use the structural elements out of the framework? Mark, sorry.
So I think one of the things I've learned over time, and if you've watched any of the shows on this stream, you'll know I love to read books as well. But what I've learned coaching SPCs is different people have different learning modes. And with some, you can't get them to read a book to save your life, right? Maybe you can get them to listen to an audio book. Maybe there's just no way in which you're ever going to get them to consume a book. So I will often, and anybody I coach, I'll be like, oh, have a think about this book. I'd always say when you read a book, you want to read it because there's a problem you're trying to solve, and it gives you a goal to reading the book. Right? I'm trying to do this. I'm struggling. I'm reading a book because I'm reading the book because it's going to help me with the current thing, as opposed to out of pure intellectual interest. So that's my preface on the books. The three that I picked, and I wound up going, I've got to just restrict myself to small numbers of books. Radical Focus by Christina Wadke. It's actually an OKR book. It's my favorite book on OKRs. It's a very practical how to make OKRs work for you. And it might be a strange thing to show up here, but I'm going to tell you why I put it here. Quite often when you take a business team and say, well, let's figure out how to run as an Agile team, their very early days, fitting Scrum to their world might be very awkward. Fitting Kanban to their world might be very awkward. You really regularly find yourself having to go, well, what's the life cycle that's going to work for you? But also knowing that you want people to get into some level of cadence and synchronization. And the trouble with going straight to Kanban is that you've got to get a fair degree of discipline with Kanban to get good cadence and synchronization. And Scrum's its own fun, particularly if you're a team that has a lot of BAU work flowing in as well as your planned work. So what Christina Wadke puts forward in Radical Focus is the idea of basically a weekly rhythm with your OKRs. So you set quarterly OKRs, and every week you run a sprint against your quarterly OKRs. And you have a start of week that says, what are we going to focus on this week to make progress towards our OKRs? And you have an end of week where you go, what progress did we make and what did we learn? And you look at it and you go, well, that's like a sprint cycle. And as a kind of helping people to ease in, what I quite regularly do when I work with a business team is I go, let's talk about some of the principles of Agile, the idea of collaboration, shared learning, reflection. And by the way, lightest possible way to start, let's get a rhythm that says we run a 1 week or a 2 week cycle where we're agreeing what our shared focus is, and we're collaborating towards that shared focus, and we're driving learning. So that's why that book came up. Principles of Product Development Flow, it's been a mainstay of SAFe ever since we began. It's a scary book. Everybody who talks about it says by the third time you read it, you'll understand it. But what's the truth, right? And I like the word, the use that they have in the framework of specialization here. When you're tailoring, when you're adapting to go, it's a different type of team, right? They're doing a different type of work as you start to get out of the kind of cookie cutter world. How do you help them specialize their practices without breaking them? You do it because you know the principles. And there's just so much gold in the principles of product development flow if you're really trying to grow as a team. Lucky last, 4 types of problem by Art Smalley. There's an emphasis in this dimension on continuous improvement. I wrestled with the fact that there's, of course, lots of emphasis on continuous improvement in Agile teams and continuous learning culture. But I went, got to acknowledge the continuous improvement. 4 Types of Problems, a really interesting book by one of the guys who was kind of there at the beginning of Lean, to say when you're thinking about improvement, there are actually different types of problems you're going to face and different types of technique that are going to help. And if you're trying to expand your toolkit in terms of helping with improvement, adding a little bit of sophistication can be a useful thing. So that's my 3.
Thank you very much, Mark. Going through the book list, Nico, one of your books caught my attention, the Psychological Safety Playbook.
Yeah, the reason why I put it on was in this area. As I said at the beginning, I expect leaders, all people in the work being lean and agile. What does it mean for me? It means being open for feedback, being able to do experiments. And for that, you need an environment where you don't kill people when they say, "Oh, I think we have a problem," and say, "Oh, that's a bad messenger. Let's kill him or her or whoever." What this book was really great when I read it the first time. It's something it's so small, so thin. You give it to somebody who is a leader, and you can read it in a half a day. By the way, I read it when my kids were swimming because I didn't feel well. I think I had some temperature, and we've been in a swimming area. I just read it in 4 hours, and I thought, cool. That's something you can give people, and it's designed like a playbook, a real playbook, not this what we call these days playbooks. It's just read it as a Bible. It's just a 4-page per move, and it really helps you understand how you can create an environment where feedback is not only appreciated, where feedback is needed, where experiments are okay, and how you create an environment where everybody feels safe to talk, safe to express express what they think. And that's why I liked it. I discussed it with Mark. It's not something when I read the book, it was for me a huge eye opener. It was something I've said, hey, that's a really great summary. And some things were differently written with new vocabulary, which I can adapt. That's what helps me as a coach. But mostly was a really great summary, because I was used to read such thick books from the States, and now having a book that is so small and having so much content was really fun and great. That's why I put it there.
Cool. Ali, you have some interesting stuff on your list as well.
Yes. The thing is, when I was thinking about this topic, so this is organizational agility and books that might help in that. I couldn't help myself to do anything else other than to zoom out. To zoom out as an organization. I am an SPC in a large company, a company with multiple departments, and somehow the organization needs to understand how to collectively test the market, how to collectively reach out to customers, how to handle that, how to do that, and how to maneuver any obstacles that are popping up on the way. So I've I sort of got stuck. I was stuck in that, essentially. I was stuck in that kind of a mindset. We need to find ways to test strategies and to adjust. So the first book that popped up into my mind is the famous blue cover book from Eric Ries, The Lean Startup. Why? Because in the Lean Startup, it emphasizes the need to test the market, and that you require everyone that works with you to do so. And you need to do that quickly, and only by doing it quickly, you're testing your hypotheses and can adjust. Essentially, you're adjusting your strategy. And that set up my sort of the thought process for the rest of the book. So wiring the winning organization, which is actually it's unfair that I'm placing it right here. Why? Because the book is not out yet. There's an excerpt written by Gene Kim, and I think there was another author. So I've pre-ordered the book, but I've read the excerpt. It's essentially this. It's for anyone who has been following Gene Kim and his and the books that he's been authoring or co-authoring, from the Phoenix Project to the DevOps Handbook to let's say all of the other books and articles that are related. You're following sort of a narrative where whomever is involved in the development of value and the delivery of value, so the entire value stream, needs to be connected, needs to be involved in feedback collection, in feedback creation, up and downstream. So anyway, so there, and he's about to publish a new book talking exactly about this, how to set that up. Which is also a little bit related to the book number 3, The Leader's Guide to Radical Management. I think the book already exists for quite a few years. Quite a breakthrough book for Stephen Denning, where I think the main takeaway for me was that from that book is actually that the Agile way of working. Yes, we're always talking about we need everyone involved, and this cannot be just a development thing. We need to do this all together, and yada yada yada. The book of Stephen Denning talks about that the Agile way of working, the short-cycled, all hands on deck, test the market quickly, fail fast, and more specifically, fail cheap, is actually not for everyone. It's not for everyone. There will be enough people in your trains, colleagues in your department, in your company, that are very uncomfortable with that approach, with testing the market that quickly, with being that open very frequently. So it's sort of it changed perspectives on, or actually for me, it changed perspectives. So it's a good and interesting book to read. And then the last two, Blue Ocean Strategy and the Innovator's Dilemma, both are a little bit of an academic kind of type, written in a sort of an academic type of way. Both books already exist for quite some time, and but also both of these books, they talk about that collectively you're trying to test the market. And that means that you need to figure out who do you need in order to be able to do that. Who do you need from your own organization, business owners, HR, finance, procurement, logistics, in order to be able to frequently test the market. And I think from the last two books there are some bits and pieces from it that I liked in the matter.
Again, listening to you guys, very interesting, the different approaches we had compiling the book list, right? And what was the driving force behind my 3 books is I went back to what is lean thinking people, lean agile teams acting lean. And let me start with This is Lean from Modig. It's really showing how we should perceive a context and then going into action. And I learned a lot out of this. And the main message is, don't pursue resource efficiency, pursue flow efficiency, right? If people are busy like hell, that's not lean. If we focus on the flow item, and that struck me, and it really impacted me a lot, the way I act personally and the way I act as a change agent. Lean Enterprise from Humble, Molesky, and O'Reilly is a vast body of knowledge. If you look at the enterprise from a holistic view, what are different approaches you can use? So again, like Mark said, if you contextualize where you are, this is probably one of the sources to go to and pick the stuff that would help you in your daily work. And one of the books I really like is Value Stream Mapping from Karen Martin, Mike Osterling. Next week, I'm going to a customer. We're not talking about SAFe. We're talking about an operational value stream.
Yeah.
How can we extend that one? And this is probably a good anchor then to dive into what is value stream mapping as a tool, but we probably mainly will talk about what are value streams, how do you generate value, and how do you deliver value in a good way so the customer is happy and you're predictable. You can say, when do I get it and what does it cost and what's in it for me, right?
So,
Mark, you're smiling.
jumping on that one, because I love that book, right? Value Stream Mapping is a phenomenal book. But there's an interesting prod to me that I thought about while I was setting up for the stream and didn't have to follow up. And it was kind of just glancing at what had landed in your books, which is, what's the dimension where you learn value stream mapping? Is this the dimension where you learn value stream mapping? Or is it another one? And, you know, if I was a better safe fellow, I would probably not have to ask myself that question. I'd go, it's exactly here. But if this is the dimension where you learn value stream mapping, the dimension just exploded. Because in my head, value stream mapping triggers this, and it's a tool that supports your focus. But I'd naturally go, no, the value stream mapping, surely it lives somewhere else. Because if this is the value stream mapping competency dimension, then we needed 2 shows.
Or, as we talked about in during preparation, let's have an extra show or episode talking about value streams, value stream mappings in general, right?
I suspect that's going to get on the backlog if it doesn't wind up being the center of one of the dimension talks.
Yeah, all right.
And I mean, then what have we been doing if we've haven't jumped into this core competency early enough? So if you know, if as an SPC or T or fellow or whomever is involved in trying to sculpt Scaled Agile or the Scaled Agile framework for a company, what have we been doing without this core competency? I mean, if you would start without this core competency, let's say going through it, understanding it, then aren't we missing a lot? Probably. Like, that's I'm like, it's where you start. I think this sort of I completely missed this.
Okay.
Yeah, the funny thing is, when I've seen this core competency before, there were 5, not 7 in the early versions. And when they came up with this, I thought to myself, what the heck? I don't need this. It's just they needed a nice number. 7 is nicer than 6. So really, the first time I read the core competency in the old versions, I thought, so yeah, it's also not so big article. So yeah. And what's the difference? The business agility sounds similar. So in the beginning, when you're fresh, it was a kind of, I don't need this. And now, some years later, so I'm so happy it is there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we'll need 2 shows and 3 shows of this core competency. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so at the base of everything.
Yeah. May I direct our attention a little bit more to our experience or knowledge when it comes to what else can support us in this dimension, lean thinking people and lean agile teams? Mark, would you like to kick it off?
I think the first thing I'll say is, when I was looking at this, I went, there's a gap for me because I don't have a long list, right? What I do know is that I've probably read 10 HR books over the last year, because I think the notion of, hiring for talent is pretty well covered. If you look at Fabiola Aitola's stuff, her Agile HR Explorer course, you look at the Agile HR white paper, I think what's the difference in the people you're looking for and the culture you're looking for is well covered. What I don't think is well covered is how do you deal with the painful bits, right? If you are, for example, trying to run a dual operating system, there are massive HR implications for that. And what do you do about career progression in a dual operating system world? What are the implications for spans of control? There are so many big questions about the really thorny pieces to solve. And if you don't solve them, it's never going to stick, right? The world is full of people who really corrupted the chapter model from Spotify, thinking that's the answer. And I've seen more disasters than anything else in that space. But that question of, who's going to write the book that says this is the HR book that solves the challenge of the hardcore stuff as opposed to the who you're hiring and what your culture is stuff, I think for me is still open. So, there's kind of the acknowledgement there. The two call-outs I'd make would be the Business Agility Conference and Business Agility Institute in general. They've got a lot of great material in that space. They get a lot of great speakers and talks at their conferences. And the other place would be the Agile HR community courses. I've known a few HR people who've been on them and said they were really good. Haven't been on one myself, so I'm recommending them based on recommendations I got from HR people.
Ali, you second Mark's statements going to conferences. Why is that? What's your experience?
I think maybe it says more about me than anything else. I like to dive into topics and then read and investigate the heck out of them. But there's a tendency of bias. Sort of, I'm selecting the books that I think are fitting. And what I've noticed is that those biases are being broken down and destroyed whenever I interface with like-minded people from different companies talking about the similar challenges. And I've noticed that next to books, there are and articles, there are all types of conferences that are talking about something that is similar. We as let's just say safe adjacent experts. I hope I don't offend anyone. Nerds. There's a little bit of an obsession in trying to understand what can we do in order to help our clients or in order to help our colleagues in that context. And there's a lot of value in everything that is written out, but there's also a lot of value in stories from other types of companies. And I've actually last week I've been to a seminar which was hosted somewhere in the Netherlands, which was about model-based engineering. Model-based engineering. So yes, we know MBSE, model-based systems engineering, is a version of, let's say, that's a definition also written out by Nkosi. It's something similar, but it's in a way it is breaking down the handoff moments, or sort of just taking out the handoff moments of knowledge amongst multiple engineering disciplines involved in building large machines, jet fighters, and in this case, naval ships. Many different specialisms are involved there. And the funny thing is, during that presentation, or during those presentations, I was like, wait a second, they're talking about connecting the value stream. They're talking about dependency management. They're talking about having one language over multiple expertises. So, you know, it's essentially the delay is in the handover. They were talking about the exact same topics using different language, and therefore also having slightly different solutions that they've implemented and sharing those kind of stories. And I think these type of presentations and seminars are immensely valuable, because it breaks you out of the potential bias of, you know, you're reading the same books about the same topics over and over and creating an echo chamber for yourself, and you're going into a slightly different environment that is still focused on getting products developed faster, creating a nicer workplace. And I found immense value in these type of seminars.
Well, thank you very much, Ali. Nico and I had a similar topic here. Nico, perhaps a few sentences. Why are strategizer sources helpful for an SPC growing and then unleashing more potential?
It will come back in another dimension, but in this case, it's really about during fast experimentation, understanding the value, understanding the profit, maybe not only value. This was really a huge impact. I started during COVID time doing they have self-based learning sessions. I bought the whole stuff and did week by week some parts of the books. Was really well done and really helped me, again, a different language, understanding our portfolio canvas better, because it's a business model canvas. I did it before several times as workshops, but now having more examples, it was really cool. And I'm with Ollie. Sometimes you end up being the smartest guy in the room, so you have to go somewhere else to meet other smart people, so you can just go in a different direction. And for me, Strategizer was one of those things. So, okay, now I learn from other people something a little bit differently, different vocabulary. And Ollie, I try each year do something which has nothing to do with SAFe. Sometimes it sounds like silly. This time it was business constellation 2 weeks ago. It's completely nothing to do with SAFe, nothing to do with other things I'm doing, but was helpful to realize what can I take out in my work. So I'm a fan of like you, Ollie, going out, meeting other people, discussing with them, going out of my own bubble, and meeting other smart people who are smart in their area, like in this group too. So I feel again having peers with different experience, sometimes same experience, and exchanging. And yeah, Stefan, Strategizer was really the thing that helped me 2 years ago, connecting differently to the topic of strategy than just from the SAFe material, even if it's quite similar. It will come back again in the next dimension.
Perfect. Perfect.
Just a comment in passing on the way through there, because, you know, I'm so with you guys. There's a reality in SAFe, and I think a lot of, particularly SPCs who didn't come from a Agile and Lean background before SAFe, think that SAFe is the answer. In my head, SAFe has always been the assembly, right? There's a reality that says what's amazing about SAFe is that they synthesize and contextualize concepts. But if you take something like, you know, model-based engineering, well, you know, SAFe's going to have 1,800 words in an article, or less than that in a section of an article. There might be an extended guidance paper, which is going to have 3,000 words. But there's a whole industry that writes books and runs conferences and seminars specifically on model-based engineering. And if you're trying to grow somewhere, you know, the clue that SAFe gives you is, hey, in this competency, you need to learn this stuff. But you're never going to learn it just by reading the distillation that's in SAFe. It's like, you know, thinking you've read a book when you read the Goodreads, you know, 10-minute summary of the book. It's hey, I'm aware and I've got knowledge. Model-based engineering might be the thing that's going to help me in this place. Now I'm going to go to all the source material as the way of getting my extended knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And by the way, Mark,
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I need a
Go for it.
conference in Australia just to have a reason to visit you. Is there something in Australia, a conference or a...
Yes, exactly. I'm 100% with that. Come on, we need to all fly to
Well, you know,
to the other side of the world.
there's a Shaping
Come on.
Agility retreat in Denver next year that Eric and I have planned. We haven't communicated about it broadly yet, but I'm a fan of rotating that around the globe. So,
That's it.
Thank
Now
you.
it's on the stream now. Therefore, it is out there in the world. The rest of the world knows. They're booking their tickets to Denver and soon to Australia. Nice.
Okay, cool. So guys, any other ideas that tickle you that could help an SPC to grow? What would you like to mention and to pick out of this frame?
If I may start, because it's really for me it was it's an important thing. I think SPCs, which are coaches, should also understand more the coaching mechanics. And when I did a systemic coach in Switzerland, I think in the English part of word is called professional coach or whatever. So you need really real coaching skills. Before this education, I was just a consulting, naming himself a coach. It changed completely my approach, also how I consult. So my tip for an SPC is become a systemic coach yourself. My tip for everybody else is work with people who have a systemic coaching background. It really changes the way you're approaching change. And that was my thing. Whenever I'm in on conference, I tell people who say, "Yeah, I'm a Scrum Master, I'm a coach." Then I ask them, "Okay, do you have any coaching background?" So no, I just know the Scrum Guide by heart. I just am an SPC. I can coach. No, you can't. Try to find out how you can really coach. And this is the you realize I'm now faster and louder. It's a hard topic for me, and it's really important that for me that coaches are also real coaches and not just name themselves coaches because it's not protected the title coach.
that's cheating, Nico. That is cheating.
Oh, why?
But it's not in this dimension.
Yeah, but Mark, we
We
are
know
peeking
you
over
will
the
be-
fence, right? Now we are looking over the fence. That's okay. That's
He's
okay.
building bridges, this Nico. He's building bridges. That's what he's doing. He's expanding. He's expanding this this core competency.
Okay. Any further ideas you would like to throw in?
I think I have one. Because
it.
whenever we talk about organizational agility, still with my zoomed out lens, trying to figure out what can an SPC do, or maybe even what helped me in getting me and whomever I'm working with in tweaking, finding an agile way of working that works in the context, to align to a single strategy, or to understand and test our strategy, and maybe understand and create brainstorm about deviations for strategy. It somehow helped to create confrontation. And there is nothing better than inviting actual, real customers who are willing to participate and have a strong enough voice. So, I mean, imagine one of the key customers, the account lead of a key customer of the company is coming over and then organizing a roundtable for just that. We've done that once for an inspect and adapt. So we had an inspect and adapt session, half a day. And as a matter of fact, there's a little bit that we just took a very brief moment to organize a customer roundtable over there. I promise you, this was the most visited inspect and adapt in that company of 50,000 people ever. I've never had an inspect and adapt that popular. Why? Because we had a couple of customers there to tell them what was good and what they didn't like, and that sort of aligned everyone to adjust strategy.
And that's how you leave the backyard, right? Towards Champions League. Mark, any ideas towards Champions
Yes.
League?
I'm afraid mine are much more grounded than heading for the Champions League. Couple of links there to things I've already mentioned. Comments I'd make on the way through, because we haven't really talked a lot about agile workspaces and agile environments, and knowing that we're all facing the world of remote. There's a guy called Mark Kilby. I've known him for a long time. He decided his life's work was going to be helping people do remote agile well. And he has been publishing, sharing, and talking about techniques for building vibrant distributed agile teams for a long time. And he's got just a heap of great stuff there. So to do homage to the fact that that is part of this dimension, go and have a look at Mark Kilby's work. The other thing I'd say is games are huge. When you're breaking into new audiences, games are a great way to learn. And I know I was doing a transformation a few years ago with a big government department, and we had some amazing trains. They're actually all business-enabled arts. And there was a massive appetite from requests to the rest of the business going, that's an amazing way to work. How do we get to be agile? And it's from places like policy departments. There was the one that sticks out in my head is the department that was responsible for making sure that the agency was correctly interpreting policy and providing feedback to the government about proposed new policy initiatives wanted to be agile. And of course,
Oh my God.
that was not, I'll go be an art or go do Scrum. But what they loved was the collaboration, the critical conversations, the really probing and testing for finding ways through instead of saying you can't go through. And we came up with a one-day course that I used again and again and again. It's a warm-up. You're interested in what's going on over there. You want to start using some of the agile ideas yourself. You're not yet ready to be a full agile team. So we built this one-day course, and a lot of the one-day course was playing games. One of those games that just hit every business audience was the marshmallow game. All right. In terms of building that concept of test and learn is such a powerful thing, and it's so much fun. So think about gamification. Marshmallow game's a great one. Couple of links there. I wrote a white paper, or co-wrote a white paper with Laurie Priller that's up on the the community guidance articles a few years back now, where we basically took the safe implementation roadmap and talked about the criticality and the kind of nature of focus of HR at every stage of the implementation roadmap. Life's moved on a little bit, but there's still some good thinking in there. There's also a presentation, and unfortunately there used to be a video of it online, but it's not around anymore. A keynote that I did at Enterprise Agile Russia back in 2019 on enabling business agility by forming arts that go beyond technology. And I couldn't find the video. I think we can guess why you can't find it anymore. But I still have the PowerPoint deck, and it's got talking notes in it because the translator needed them. But I just shared a couple of images there on the side of some of the takeaways that come out at the end of it, because it was really a comparative case study of two organizations that had gone down this path of going from technical agility to business agility and some of the big lessons learned along the way.
Perfect. A short roundup of this section of our talk and discussion. I thought about again what is lean, and if lean is enterprise sport, we should consider the system as a viable system. I'm now, since a few years, I'm diving into the work of Stafford Beer. He came up with the viable system model 1950, around that. Then Ashby's law of requisite variety. How can you tackle complexity, stuff like that? We talk about lean agile teams. How do you tackle complexity? That's stuff that tickles me and that helps me to find a better way for myself as a coach, as a trainer, as a trusted advisor to do my job. If you're fine, gents, I would like to move to what are the anti-patterns or misinterpretations of lean thinking people and agile teams. I wouldn't like to start. I'd like to hand over the talking stick to one of you guys.
Go ahead, eeny, miny, mo. Who goes?
Nico, you've got a great place to start us.
So I like what you are showing because it's not mine. It's really cool. The lack of experimentation. It's really important. The missing focus. It's a really important one. From my side, the important thing is as a leader manager, you have to be part of it and doing the same thing you're asking from your people. Some people call it eat your own dog food, others call it drink your own champagne. Maybe depends on the kind of clothes you are wearing, but you have to be part of it, not only ordering it. And yeah, that's the big anti-patterns I see. I completely agree with what you're sharing now and adding as a manager, leader, you have to be part of it. And the anti-pattern is not being. Holly.
Yes, I think the anti-pattern is inconsistency in language, in nomenclature. And what do I mean with that? Everyone that has been in an agile transformation, I don't like the term agile transformation, but anyone that has been in that kind of environment for long enough, you figured out that in different teams, in different departments, in different trains, in different areas, there's just a different understanding behind a certain term. Whether it is PI planning, whether it is a sprint, whether it is the MVP, whether it is the product owner and everything to expect from a product owner, whether it is the architectural runway or enabler or an epic, not writing it out, not identifying a common baseline for definitions. It just hurts later on. Whenever we're a little bit further, there are more people that are onboarded in the Agile way of working, whether it is development teams or it's business teams, or it's leadership that just wants to understand what is happening within the company. Not writing out and defining language, terminology in the context of the company it hurts later on. I mean, because eventually you have a lot of lean and agile thinking people, but they think they are talking about the same thing, but the definition behind a certain term is just completely different.
I have an anecdote.
Go for
Years
it.
ago, I had Alistair Coburn in Zurich giving a meetup, and somebody asked him what he thinks about SAFe. And after some quiet time, he said he likes the glossary because it helps him finding a common vocabulary very fast. Usually, he needs around 2 days, and with a glossary, he's faster. And then it stopped. Yeah, finding more advantages in SAFe, but the glossary, yeah.
I had a
Alistair.
very long chat to Alistair in the very early days of SAFe when it was just taking off. It was a very funny chat. He was at a 50th birthday party for a friend, and there was a lot of alcohol had gone before, but enough of that story. I'm just gonna
Come on, spill the beans.
What happens when you've had a few drinks stays when you've had a few drinks, I think. I would like to just second the common language thing, because there's a temptation, right, to, you go and talk to a different world and they say, oh, that word doesn't work for us. And, if you go back to things that I think are core value propositions for SAFe, the common language is one. And it was one of the things that really stood out in Prague, the number of customer stories. And I thought the one that did it most eloquently was Nordea. And, he hit that moment. He said, look, we hit a point in our journey where we had 4 flavors of Agile. And the reality was that, people had picked flavors that had been right for their context, but we were all talking different languages. And we decided we had to talk a common language. And I think that notion of going, it's a common language, it's a common language, it's a common language, is so powerful. Now, at the same time, I think you can decide to change a SAFe term without breaking SAFe, but you've got to change it consistently. Yeah, I still remember Agile Release Planes. And I thought Agile Release Planes was a lovely customization of SAFe for Air France and KLM, right? But you've got to find a word that sticks across the whole organization. A couple of takeaways for me. One of those in terms of commonality patterns is thinking about Agile business teams and Agile dev teams instead of just thinking about Agile teams and saying, what's the mission? What are the skills we need? And sometimes those skills will all be business type skills and sometimes they'll all be technology skills, but very often they'll be a mix. And I've worked with a lot of arts where you looked at your typical Agile team and it was, you know, kind of 30, 60, 30, 70, 40, 60 blend of the different types of skill sets. And wow, they did amazing stuff. So taking advantage as you start to spread and think more holistically of going, actually, when I compose teams, what are the skills I need to gather in the team? So that'd be the first anti-pattern to watch out for me. The second one, you've got to specialize. You can't just shove recipe Scrum, recipe Kanban into a non-typical team. You've got to figure out how to adapt it without breaking the idea and without breaking the common language. Lucky last, and this was really speaking back to long-running teams, was you've got to think of your vendor staff as part of your teams. I think there's a really common anti-pattern that there's, you know, two classes of citizen. But if you've got a company that's really reliant on vendors for a massive part of your product and strategy capability, and when you're thinking about long running, you're not thinking about long running through that more holistic lens, you're heading for trouble. Notwithstanding that, there are often some quite interesting legal implications of getting into that mindset, as Ali shared a story earlier.
Let me round this one up as well. And I'm picking up this specialization term that you brought in, Mark. 2017, I was able to support an Agile HR train. No software.
Yeah.
Totally different perspective, right? And it forced us at an early stage take the structural elements, the principles, the concepts, and to adapt to what is the job to be done of an HR department. And with that, let me move to one of the last frames. What's the job to be done? I really struggled at the beginning when I was preparing this one. What are key opportunities or pain points for yourself as you apply this dimension? And I came back to this based on the Kellogg's model. What is output? What is outcome? What is impact? But before we probably kind of summarize, what's your thoughts about opportunities or even pain points when it comes to this dimension? Lean thinking people, lean agile teams.
Yeah, who goes first?
Ali.
Let's see. Apparently, I'll just take the. I'll just take it. Let's see. Key opportunities or pain points for yourself as you apply this dimension. I think something that I've noticed myself falling into over and over again is to just not focus and to take up too much at the same time. So what do I mean? We're talking about lean and agile thinking people, which is also beyond your development teams. And before you know it, you are the trainer. You are the person that has been involved in defining the common nomenclature within the organization. So you're the agile dude. And that means that anything agile, whether it's way of working, whether it's the formal parts, so the formal processes, the formal agreements, the governance structures, but also anything training and how are we doing this in our marketing team? Because we are a marketing team creating radio and TV ads. So we're not really developing software, but you're the agile dude, right? So can you tell us how we can do this in our context? Instantly creating, putting yourself into a situation where you are the common, or how should I call it, the single point of failure. It just. Yeah, it's a pain point. Let's just call it like that. And I think there's a lot of value in stepping aside as fast as possible after you've trained and upskilled a few people, and then pushing them to the front and letting them be shine as whomever is defining nomenclature or involved in alignment of language and governance structures and that kind of stuff.
From my side, we don't do
Agree.
Agile because it's fun or just because the Agile is the goal. We are doing Agile as an organization because we want to achieve something. And that's also the focus you told before, but also being able to measuring outcomes and impacts, you name it, as long as we don't measure outputs. So we are not sitting in a circle and smoking a joint. We are just doing something for the company. And that's an important part for me. And I hope I didn't cross over to another dimension, Mark.
The dimension of sitting out in a corner smoking a joint.
Nice.
Safe Summit Berlin is coming up. Okay. See you there, guys.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to take the ball, and I thought about pain points and opportunities separately. And I think I've kind of heard both you guys talk about the two sides of the same coin. And I think we're very much on a similar page. The biggest one for me is, and my note said opining before understanding. But, walking in thinking you're an expert in somebody else's world before you actually understand their world. And it goes back to Ali's comment of you've got to activate them to own it rather than own it yourself. Because the people who can figure out how to make it work for them are them. When you sort of get out of the backyard into the big league, you go and talk to an HR team, or I had an art which was an enterprise PMO. Right. And they went, if we're going to support the organization on this path to agility, we need to practice it ourselves so that we can understand how to support the organization as it goes down that path. So, enterprise PMO for a major government department running as a release train, it was weird. They spoke a language that I didn't speak. And, making it work for them, and boy, it worked amazingly for them in terms of some of the things that came out of it. But you couldn't go in and go, this is how you do it. You could go in and say, tell me how you work, tell me the kinds of work you do, tell me the things that are really important to you, the challenges you have, and help them to figure out the answer, as opposed to going, I've got the answer and I can't even speak your language. So that's the second one, is the pain point is speaking the wrong language. Walking in using a lot of terms, because an awful lot of SPCs come out of a technology background, and we use technology examples, and we use technology words, and we have a lot of assumed knowledge, because we're trying to map our context out instead of helping them map their context in. So finding the new words, and it could be as simple as, if you're going to go and teach a SAFe course to a business audience, doing some pre-thinking to say what kind of examples might resonate with them when I bring up an example to illustrate something. Little stuff like that makes a huge difference. So there's your pain points. Here's your opportunities. Wow, you get to learn. When you figure out how to make Agile principles and Agile ideas work for weird places like Agile HR teams or Agile policy teams, the amount of stuff you learn about how to structure your way back to the principles, figure out a specialization, it's phenomenal. So you're learning opportunities, and you learn, you do it once or twice, and then you bring that back and you go, oh, wow, I've now got a whole bunch of things I've learned to look for when I want to tackle new frontiers. So that's a big opportunity to me, just your personal learning and growth. Last big opportunity is, particularly if this one is the world where people started in technology. The truth of the anti-pattern for technology-driven SAFe is, as often as not, you're still in an order taker mentality. right? The business gives orders and technology fulfills the orders, and they get better at fulfilling the orders. And they don't have the capability in the arts to actually deliver business outcomes because you've got go-to-market channels and things like that that actually get the outcomes out the door. So you can't actually go end-to-end in the value stream. As soon as you break out and you start to go, actually, I'm going to build arts that go end-to-end in the value stream because I've got the right people in the mission, and I can see that whole journey and I can generate the feedback on the whole journey. At that point, it opens so many doors in shifting my culture that it's not funny. And that's exciting.
Perfect. I like it. I hope a few coins dropped today during this episode. Where are we? We talked about lean thinking people and agile teams. What does the journey hold? We will see how we will move on. For sure, we have to deepen the knowledge and have some talks about further aspects of agile teams, like what is team and technical agility, where it comes to more the nitty-gritty details. Organizational agility, like what is lean business operations, if we want to support. And you guys mentioned it various times as well. Lean thinking people includes management, leadership, and probably we might start with some mindset, values, and principles. With that, I would like to conclude and looking to my mates. Final statements.
Just thank you.
Who goes first? Who goes first?
First come,
From my
first
side,
serve.
just thank you. Just thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Nico.
I'll echo that.
Nice, same here, because, if we're in an echo chamber anyways, then let's echo it. No, you've done fantastically. Thanks for guiding us through this dimension, which we figured out right now is huge and way larger than we could stuff into. Well, it has been 1.5 hours in a 1.5 hour stream. This could be in sort of an afternoon.
Yeah.
That's the case. So, folks, I would like to close that session. See you hopefully next time
So
when we have further dimensions to cover. Mark.
I'm going to pause you for just a second, because in the spirit of radical transparency, we've built a habit on all our other streams of doing a quick live retro in terms of modeling. And so we do the retro before we end, in the hope that at some point, as we get listeners, they'll come and go, hey, I agreed with this point of the retro, but I didn't agree with that one. So if a quick, just kind of 5-minute reflection, and I'm going to seed the 5-minute reflection with, we had a goal of a 90-minute time box. We did 96 minutes. Thank you for pacing us, Stefan. I had a couple of moments where I went, oh, are we going to struggle with that? What were your thoughts? What would you keep, change, drop, amplify?
Yeah, from my side, a big kudos to Stefan, who did all the whole Miro work together with Mark. I was so happy we had to switch on Sunday because Saturday Miro was down, so I had more time to put my things on the Miro board. So I think I should start earlier preparing, or or having more than just 1 half day preparing. So thank you very much, Stefan and Mark, for your huge preparation, and me just being a Muppet Show part of it from the balcony and adding some points of it. That was really huge. And for myself, I should be earlier in preparing or in adding stuff on the Miro board, which could include that the Miro board is earlier finished or more than Friday. Could be one thing on the retro. And the length, also thank you for the fast moderation and that we quite nailed the time box without the retro in the time box, but it's okay.
I'm going to echo that. how did you call it? A Muppet of the
Muppet Show balcony, yeah.
the Muppet Show balcony. I'm next to you on that same balcony. We have a fantastic view, of a show that has been orchestrated really nicely. So thanks a lot, guys. Was done really well. If I would focus on what to improve the next time, I think. We've been trying to give each other space in talking, and every now and then there was maybe it's because of their slight delay in the stream that we have, or well, not the stream, but the sort of the video chat that we have, that we sort of talk over each other. Which is, I think, totally fine, but we just want to understand how we would like to handle that also in the future. In terms of prep, I think I'm 100% with Nico, preparing a little bit earlier. That really helps. I think the struggle that I had is preparing, or let me rephrase, to focus. It's very easy. Mark, you mentioned it earlier. There's a million things happening in our minds. So everything is connected with everything, which also means that the moment that we're thinking about lean and agile teams or lean and agile people, then before lean thinking people and agile teams, then before you know it, we're bringing in portfolio, we're bringing also in training, we're bringing in something completely different, and it's all related, but it's tough to just focus very specifically on only this dimension. So I think that's something that I'm going to take with me for the next show.
So
For
I'll
me,
jump in.
Sorry, Mark, go.
I was going to say, I'll jump in so Stefan can close out and then close out the show. For me, and I'm just looking for little minor tweaks, right? A few mechanical things to me. One, I think whoever's hosting, because you've got that anchor frame, a little bit of, let me give you a high-level digest. So Stefan was very generous. He'd be like, I'll pull up the anchor frame and I'll throw it to somebody. But I think a little snippet from you to go, hey, let me just talk a little bit to what's on screen right now before I pass the ball would just be a nice tweak. I also think a little bit of deliberate ball passing. So what we know is, you throw the ball open and it's like everybody looks at each other. And sometimes you're in a discussion, you want to interact and respond to something, but when you're about to deliberately change hands, I think if we just use a pass the ball mentality that says whoever's moderating goes, I'm going to call in somebody, and maybe you've done some pre-thought and gone, oh, I like that quote, that's where I'm going to go next after I open it. Or if you've had it going, I'm going to pass the ball. And Nico, you did that a couple of times and I went, oh, we should do that, right? Whoever has the baton passes the baton. Therefore, we don't have those dead air moments of who's going to go first and last. So they were quick mechanicals. I think we've got to tweak the template so that we can bring our comments up on screen, because some people like to be able to. And what happened was we had a comment written down and then we tended to talk around the comment rather than just the base comment. But for visual folks, us doing a bit of organization so we can actually flip frames. And I had 2 experiments with the template. I had the templates where there was space for each of us, and then the templates where it was like add stuff on the edge. They were my little just mechanical tweaks. I think that would just help it run a little bit smoother next time. Stefan also suggested that I make empty frames for all the other dimensions, so when we think of something and we don't want to lose it, that we can drop it as a placeholder into the other dimension where we've recognized it should belong. So I'll take care of that during the week. Stefan,
Good idea.
Yeah, for me, the general template works. Thank you, Mark, for the guidance, initiating it. Agreed. Probably have a space underneath each frame that we can jump to as well, if we want to bring in those notes or those statements or keywords.
Yeah.
And another tweak we probably have to think about after going through the sources, then Ali didn't jump first to the books, already to ideas like conferences, stuff like that. Probably the 3 different frames are too restrictive. Can we amalgamate them into one with different corners or a different setup, so that you are able to jump as a moderator as the flow of the discussion is evolving over the time.
So I'll give you the trade-off that went in my head, and then you guys can help maybe pick a different trade-off to the one I picked. So the trade-off, while Nico sorts himself out, I've just fixed our stream image so that we can be in a better place.
Sorry, family's awake, so I had a little intermezzo.
The trade-off I had was, if you bundled it and went, okay, there's a what's extra frame for each person, then we're at risk of creating very long monologues.
Yes.
And we've been trying to work in the other streams of going, let's try and get to, we all love a monologue, but let's frame our conversations. So we're passing the ball pretty regularly. And so I went, if we think about books, then courses and conferences, then other stuff, it allows us to trade voices within each context. Because if you flip the other way and go, what other stuff, books, conferences, and other stuff, and you go, Mark's thoughts, Ali's thoughts, Nico's thoughts, whatever the case might be, what's going to happen is a big, long monologue as we transition from head to head. The question is, can we contain ourselves, right? Because we each jump different ways, or would you guys have picked a different trade-off, or did you think of one that I hadn't thought of?
Then we have to be more disciplined following the frames, and the moderator really has the moderation function, and we stick with the concept as is, Mark. That's okay. Yeah. The other thing is, I found it very helpful as a moderator to see your notes underneath the frames, which triggered some ideas for the moderation. Or it's helpful for you guys. You did some preparation, you immediately have access to that one. If we don't want to have it on the frame, we have to place it somewhere else, so that it's helpful for moderation and it's helpful for you guys during the session, during the episode.
Were you guys following Stefan on the Miro?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I was kind of using that as my focusing tool to go, whatever, when Stefan moves the Miro,
Okay.
That's the conversation. That was kind of the way that I treated it. Okay. Maybe that's just a run another week of experiment with that framing and see what happens when we're a bit more used to the format.
Sure. That's
we're getting there. We're getting there.
Hopeful. I hope so.
All right, take us out, Stefan.
Yeah, for the outro, should we start again with this frame, or?
You're the boss.
I'm the boss. Okay. Yeah, let's have the outro with this frame. Where are we? Organizational agility with the dimension of lean thinking people and agile teams. As I said before, hopefully some coins dropped. Some dropped in my head, for sure. Thank you, guys. And we are embarking on a journey. And where the journey will lead us, surely the next few episodes towards agile teams, towards leadership, and then finding out, what do the crossroads tell us? Should we go left? Should we go right? Or should we pursue certain ideas over the time? So with that, I would say thank you very much for your time, and see you next time, episode number 3.
And I'm hitting the outro button.